Uh, how do we usually kick off the show? I can't remember.
With an intro, Ben.
Yeah, we'll do the proper one. We might just cut all this out. Ladies and gentlemen, it is I'm No Expert, the podcast about everything and nothing. I am Ben, and joined, as always, by Jason Huey of Prometheus Lights and 47s, my esteemed co-host. Jason, welcome.
What's up, boss? I appreciate the promotion to esteemed. I feel like you've given me a promotion one other time. I don't remember what it was.
Well, you know, you've earned it. You're working your way up the ladder. I'm not going to tell you what's at the top.
That's the big mystery. That's what I'm working for.
Yeah, well, heavy. What is it? Heavy sits the crown, or something like that.
Yeah.
You'll get there. You are there. God.
Yeah, it also wears all the hair off the top of your head.
There is a price. There's a price to pay.
Indeed.
When you are a leader of men. Thank you for indulging me in advance on this podcast topic. I was thinking about reliability, and I had heard this story, I think, a couple times around the like what cost us the Vietnam War, and I don't think it's fair to blame the loss on any one thing. I mean, something as complex as war, I'm sure there's countless factors, many that we won't even hear about. But the one that stood out to me because it's tangible, and real. and it's relevant to what we've talked about in the past, was the M16 versus the AK-47. So the M16 being the primary weapon that our troops carried going into that war, and then the AK-47 being the one that the enemy, or the VC, was using. And what I'd heard was that the M16 just jammed a lot. Like,
it was unreliable.
It was unreliable. It jammed all the time, and that is what cost us the war. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. That the best military in the world, with obviously at the time even, how could you compare the two? That we would go into a war with an unreliable, like the very thing that's going to win you the war, boots on the ground and guns in hands, and you equip our soldiers with something inferior to the enemy, baffled me. So I wanted to just talk about it. And I don't know, maybe the listeners is familiar, maybe more familiar. We do not claim to be experts.
I would bear in mind the title of our I would bear in mind the title of our podcast. Was that meta? I just proved my lack of expertise by stumbling over my own words.
Yeah, I can't even.
You get what I'm talking about.
Hasn't even mastered.
Just relax.
So I found this. So I want to just talk about that a little bit, and then talk a little bit more about reliability, because it continues to pop up in my life, and I'm sure it pops up in your life as well. But okay, so I found a great article about the M16 in Vietnam, a history of the weapon's effectiveness in the Vietnam War and the necessity of its creation. And there is this great passage that I'm just going to read out loud. The loudest sound in a firefight is your weapon going click. In an instant, you realize that the one thing that might protect you from the enemy has failed, and you're in a race against time. You drop to your knees and disassemble your rifle in a desperate attempt to clear the jam and stay alive. When you look up, you see a pair of eyes filled with pure hatred for you, staring down the sights of an AK-47. He doesn't know your name, but he knows your flag, and he flinches only from the recoil of his weapon as he mercilessly guns you down. You stare off, seeing the skyline of a city you can't pronounce, dying in someone else's country, bleeding out beside your broken M16.
That's pretty grim.
Pretty grim. Here's what a Vietnam veteran told a Time magazine reporter in 1967. We left with 72 men in our platoon and came back with 19. Believe it or not, you know what killed most of us? Our own rifle. Practically every one of our dead was found with his M16 torn down next to him, where he had been trying to fix it. So there you go, sort of from the horse's mouth. What I learned, a couple things, I guess, and I need to probably corroborate this, but a couple changes that were made to the M16, I think early on in the war, maybe like at the very beginning of the war. One was that they changed the rifling on the barrel, and then they chose not to chrome plate the chamber. This is the Pentagon making these changes, and I think it was to save money. And then they changed the type of propellant in the cartridge from a less fouling type to one that was a little dirtier, so it would cause like jams. So these
Just
were,
more carbon buildup,
yeah,
which
and
is
these are,
what you have to. I mean, and as that builds up, that creates friction and it changes the dimensions. Um, and in order for this relatively complex mechanism to work, it has to run free and clear. So if it's all coated in carbon, it will not do that. And I mean, I guess just anecdotally over the years, I mean, we're sort of the generation where a lot of our parents were Vietnam veterans, um, or not my parents, but you know, my friends' parents. Uh, and yeah, the one thing I heard is that you just had to clean it all the time, um, to the point where it wasn't really functional, I guess. I mean, it's like too much maintenance. I mean, there's maintenance that you have to do, and then you know, it's like every day you'd have to clean it, and I don't. You're probably supposed to do that anyway, but yeah, the cleaning was something that was a big issue.
and I think you can get away with having to clean it every day, but if it's a case of you're in an extended firefight and in the middle of that firefight, the
Right.
gun goes, "No, sorry, I need cleaning right now."
Yeah.
That's when it just becomes no longer usable, or
Yeah.
no longer
And I mean,
reliable.
it seems. I mean, I'm just trying to, again, I don't have any information. I'm just thinking through this as like from a design and engineering perspective. I mean, and so you already mentioned this, I think removing the chrome plating step. Um, and I'm trying to think like on a modern AR, if that's done, I don't know. Uh, Not that I'm aware of, but if, you know, if that was something, any extra step costs money. And if you're ramping up for a war, I assume they were looking for some places to save money. And if they eliminated that step, that seems plausible. I would also assume using a dirtier powder. I mean, because that, again, I'm just thinking through this. It seems like as the powder burns, if it burns completely, then it is clean. If it burns incompletely and leaves behind a bunch of residue and carbon, that is not clean. And typically anything that is more refined and burns more cleanly is more expensive. Like with oil and stuff, the more refined it is, the more labor goes into it, the more it costs.
Yeah, I just want to take a second because it's really sort of hitting me right now that the consequences of those decisions that were made in a war room somewhere in the Pentagon, you know, led to thousands of deaths potentially.
Yeah.
If what this one veteran is saying checked out sort of on a widespread, that's, man, that's really like, that's sad. Um, really speaks to how like little decisions, little changes can have massive consequences down.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't imagine anyone was expecting those things to cause those problems. I mean, you know, performance on a firing range is one thing,
Yeah,
you know, like on a test range in the field is entirely different,
yeah,
which, I mean, that's partly why I also don't care that much about lab tests. Um, I mean, there are certain kinds of lab tests that make sense. Other kinds of lab tests where they're not representative of the actual use case, those make less sense. You can still do them. You still have to test the thing in a real world situation. And that's, I think that's where a lot of design and engineering breaks down. You can think about it all day long, but until you put that thing to use in the field, like you actually don't know anything.
so let's apply that for a second to how you test your products specifically.
Darn it.
Specifically, let's talk specifically just about flashlights. I've seen the early alpha
Mm-hmm.
drop tests that you did. You had a bunch of people over to the shop and
Yeah.
incrementally raising it up in the air, and that is a real world testing. It's not just dropping it on some lab floor, but it's on a, you know, parking lot, asphalt, uneven, from different heights, dropping in a different way, onto different surfaces of the flashlight.
Yeah.
Not exactly scientific, but it was still it was served a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, so on the Alpha Flashlight page, there's a tab for torture tests. This is all stuff I did very early on. Um, I don't know that my perspective is necessarily different. Those things are kind of lab tests. Even the group of people standing around throwing the flashlight is somewhat controlled, right? So I mean, I think that's a little bit of a middle ground. I mean, there are specific drop testing standards for flashlights, um, and that is if you imagine the flashlight embedded in a cube, you have to drop it a certain number of times from a certain height on all 6 faces of that cube, and it's basically got to survive in order to be rated. Um, at whatever height you've specified.
Yeah.
Um, that's the thing, though. When you drop a flashlight, it doesn't always fall exactly on a face. It is randomized, and I mean that's part of the reason why we started dropping the light sort of in a more regular fashion, and then it didn't break, so we progressed to more crazy stuff. But I don't think those, again. So this is a place, I like drove over it with the car and froze it in ice, and like that stuff is part theater. It is part lab test, and it kind of gives you a baseline. But the only way to field test something is to either carry it myself or put it into other people's hands and let them use it. And like in car magazines and stuff, you have like long-term testing, right? Because you can jump in a new car and drive it around. That's one thing. After you've driven it 100,000 miles, that's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest tool that we use is customers and having lights in the field that some of them come back, or they have problems, or they don't have problems. But now we have the benefit of having lights that have been out there for 10 years, and looking at that entire history of the product and being able to look at different aspects of that, and what needs to be improved. And I think the other big benefit to us not changing the product every year is that we do get to improve it. Like when you create a new product, you're essentially starting over, and you've got to find all those problems, and finding all those problems often takes time.
Yeah.
Like there's stuff that's non-obvious, and I mean this affects like the world's largest companies as well. Is that enough rambling?
No, that's why they say don't be an early adopter of new technology. Like wait for them to get the bugs out, the new iPhone or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, it depends on what that is and what your use case is, because the other role early adopters play is, I mean, creating the data to build future improvements on.
Sure.
So if you want to be part of the process, be an early adopter. Don't be super mad if something doesn't go right. Like you're on like the quality team now, basically, if you're an early adopter.
In the case of new flashlights that come out, let's take the MXS for example. Is there a formal like suggestion box capture like system that you have in place to get that
support
feedback?
at darksucks.com.
So how do you parse through that?
So we actually, in our support platform, we are able to essentially tag tickets that come in.
Yeah.
So I developed this tagging schema to effectively allow us to sort through those cases sort of after the fact, and give us a sense of, because it's like when you have something new, somebody will report a problem. That's not that big of a deal. If you have, if that number increases over time,
yeah,
that's a problem. So we can go back and essentially, I mean, we're looking at like the statistical reporting rates as one means to, identify like, is it a random problem, or is it, a problem that is like baked into the engineering or the design or the assembly, because you can put problems into a product at any point in that process, including like packaging and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, we get lots of emails with suggestions and stuff like that, but we don't have any. I mean, we don't have any like you said, a formal suggestion box.
I guess it would be a little unwieldy and, probably inviting more emails than, a lot of noise.
Yeah, I mean,
Whereas,
that's true. And the question is always, if you've collected data, then what do you do with it? Like,
yeah,
collecting the information is not the hard part.
it's
Figuring out
organizing.
how to, sort it and understand it and interpret it is the hard part. So, I mean, that's essentially why we have this tagging system, is we can control our picture of that in the back end.
Yeah. And we're not, and I want to remind the listener, I don't feel like we're straying too far from the original topic. It was really using like the M16 and that unreliability as the platform to talk about reliability. So I have a question then, a follow-up question. Can you cite an instance where a new product hit the market and then you got enough feedback on one aspect of it that warranted change for like future iterations or runs? Or
Nope,
all your products are just perfect when you put
they're
them out
always
there?
perfect.
Yeah, that's a hard
Uh,
one. That's a tough one. And listen, let's not overstate that. That is one of the things that you strive to do, is to put out a product that is out the gate reliable and isn't going to require feedback from the user to iterate, to improve, or
yeah,
solve
I mean,
problems.
none of us are here to do a bad job. We're like trying to do a good job, but I don't know, stuff happens.
Yeah,
Anyone who deals with implementation will tell you stuff happens.
yeah.
Anyone
That
who
PG, just
sits
PGing
in
it.
a classroom. I was a student too, so no judgment. But yeah, when the rubber meets the road, implementation is a completely different thing than theory. So I mean, like with the MXS light, um, I mean there have been a couple issues with it. The first issue was there was a bug in the software of the first generation lights that wasn't like a deal breaker, but we also like, I mean, we effectively can't afford just to reject the entire order and send it back. And I mean, like in all relationships, you have like a certain amount of social capital to spend. Um, so rejecting that entire order puts a strain on that relationship. It was a new relationship. It costs everyone money. And then we're also not going to have product to sell for like 6 months or something. Who knows, 3 to 6 months while that gets straightened out. And so this is one of those things. And this is the kind of stuff that I don't want to talk about. Nobody in business wants to talk about it, but we're talking about it right now. Because, like, I don't want to admit that I make mistakes publicly. Um, or I don't want to admit that, we might have a problem with the product publicly. But I mean, this is sort of the foundation of where I started in terms of being transparent. So I made the choice to ship those lights instead of rejecting them. In the past, actually, it was just like years and years ago. It was the first big problem that we had with beta flashlights. And there was a pre-flash where on one mode, when you would activate the light, it would just give a little blink of a change in intensity before it settled on the correct mode.
Like a burst, almost like a quick burst mode.
I don't remember if it was an increase or a decrease in brightness, but it didn't just hit the mode. There was a little bobble at the beginning.
Got it.
And so we sent back like 3,000 lights. I was like, this is not perfect. People are going to complain about this. This is not the kind of company we are. We sent all those lights back. This is the problem I'm talking about. It took them, they had to take like the lights apart and rework them. It's essentially starting over. Like, it might have almost been easier just to throw them all in the trash and start again. And we were out of product, I think, for 6 or 9 months. And the cause of the problem was that there was a capacitor that we used that was globally out of stock. So the vendor who made the circuit board opted to substitute a part without telling anyone else neither us nor the factory. So nobody knew this was a problem until we started shipping lights. And it's like, it wasn't really a big deal. Like, it's a little bit annoying. It's not great, but like, we're also going to make more lights in the future. That batch represented a relatively small percentage of past and future production. And I mean, I think that is one big thing that essentially killed the momentum of that product. It took us like years to recover it. So if I were to make that decision again, I would not make the same decision. I would choose to ship those lights that had a minor problem,
and then just be
and
transparent
then
about it.
address it with the people that had an issue with it.
Would you have discounted it?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's all in retrospect.
I mean,
you would have considered it. You would have thought about it. That would have had to cross your mind.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but it's the kind of thing that it's maybe only going to bother like 10% of people.
Yeah.
But those are the people who are going to be really bothered by it. And so partly it's like, to be perfectly honest, like, what is your exposure? Like from an actuarial standpoint, which again, it's very easy to like plant your flag in the only perfection camp when you're small.
Yeah.
And these problems and mistakes aren't costing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would make a different decision. But the MXS, so I also decided to ship it. And the problem, the bug in the UI was that you could not access burst mode from off. So normally that would be 2 clicks. You could turn the light on and then double click it, and you would still get to burst mode. That's not what I intended. That's not how it's supposed to work. It is 1 extra button click. How many people use that feature anyway? And, we did get some comments about it, and we're like, look, well, if it's a problem for you, we will handle it in the future when it's corrected.
Right.
So the next shipment of lights, everything was fine. What was your original question? I just talked for like 30 minutes.
No, what I wanted to point out, what I wanted to point out is that sometimes those little quirks that afflict just a small, a specific run become the thing that makes that memorable.
Yeah.
Like, the first 1,000 of an album and the liner notes are upside down, and that becomes like a collectible because it's unusual and unique, and it didn't impact the quality. Really, it doesn't impact the quality of the beta. It's just a minor thing that happens when you first engage it. But, so those betas, to the people out there who didn't get one because Jason sent them back, like those betas probably now would be worth about $10,000 each because of that little quirk.
Especially,
so you denied the world a collectible.
Struck. Yeah, I know. Well, some people got them.
Yeah.
But I mean, so what was the original question? Give me an example of.
Yeah, when you acted on the real world feedback from consumers.
Yeah, and so I mean, like, we didn't really recognize that problem until we started shipping them, because like we can do testing, but when you have 1,000 people doing testing, that is statistically very different. And so, a lot of times people are like, well, you should have caught that. And it's like, I mean, we're not a giant company with like a QC department. Yeah. Like, maybe I should have, maybe I shouldn't have, but like some stuff doesn't become apparent until you have a lot of people out there. Ben, I just realized I am not seeing a waveform.
No, I'm there. It's just that.
No, mine.
Oh, no, I see it.
Hello.
I see.
You do see a waveform? I
do
not see one.
Yeah, don't sweat it, buddy.
What?
It's just your computer or your eyes. One of those two is broken. But I'm seeing a waveform, and I can hear you.
Are you positive?
Oh yeah, my eyes are great.
But are they reliable? Okay,
this might be the paranoia coming back in. I guess what, and I think I need to understand a little more around how quickly the Pentagon and the powers that be made the changes to improve the reliability of the M16 later on in the wars. How long did that take? Like, they would have had feedback. I would like to think that they would have had the feedback pretty quickly from the troops on the ground, particularly when you've got troops who are losing their friend because this thing jammed in a firefight. And like this one veteran said, this is what cost most of my friends their lives. You would think that that feedback would go up the chain pretty quickly. Then what? How long does it take? And
Right.
they would have had to make some calculations. They would have had to make some calculations. One, they'd have to admit that they were wrong to make the changes in the first place. And then two, they'd have to do to crunch the numbers and determine if it's worth it.
Right.
Numbers versus
that's the harder
lives.
part. And that you're right. That is a critical piece of information, or at least that I am interested in, to understand the scenario. Because, okay, so you screwed something up and there's a problem. Like, now what?
Now what?
So yeah, did it take like a year
Yeah.
for them to fix it? Or like, did reverting back actually fix the problem? Like, I this is where my knowledge runs out.
And it also we start to get into this territory of contracts with companies that are
lowest bidder.
Yeah, like lowest bidder, and then is there an established contract for X number? And then also I wonder what are the examples today of new technologies that are being introduced to the military that are failing in the field, but they're still sort of pumping out. And I'm pretty sure there were some, maybe it was at the F-35 that had all sorts of problems. That was just a money pit.
The Osprey had problems.
The Osprey had problems, but
they had a number of crashes early on.
But they would have been, the military probably would have been contracted with the company to produce X number of those things, and maybe it was costly.
I think they continued to produce them and tried to solve whatever the problem was, which I don't know what it was. But yeah, that was relatively significant. And they seem to have fixed it. I don't know, just because you don't hear about unreliable Ospreys crashing anymore.
Yeah,
that is a terrifying flying vehicle.
Based on
to start with.
Why?
I don't know. It's just like a mashup of an airplane and a helicopter.
Yeah.
It's very futuristic. It just looks super awkward and like non-traditional.
Is that the one where the propellers
rotate? Tilt rotor? Yeah. Sorry.
Rotor. Yeah. So you've got complexity, as you're speaking to complexity, moving parts and complexity that can lead to greater chance of error.
Yeah.
Malfunction. It's just that these are like the stakes don't get any higher. If you get a flashlight that bobbles when you turn it on, there's very low stakes there. But you get a gun that jams or a helicopter plane that doesn't work. Like, you're talking about lives that get lost. So
yeah. And reliability is what we're talking about. It's not always life threatening.
Yeah.
Certainly it is worthwhile to pay more attention to the reliability of things that could become life-threatening if they fail.
Yeah.
But just in life, nobody likes stuff that fails, right? I don't like it. That's one of the things that drives me the most insane. Like yesterday, I was setting up to shoot some video about the new 3D printer. And I pick up my little tripod. I don't know, it's kind of like a selfie tripod stick. But I keep my camera on it, and the head just fell off. Like, I picked it up out of the drawer, and the head just fell off. And I'm like, I barely use this thing. What happened? And just the little plastic bits that attach the GoPro mount, the little fingers, I don't know, they just broke off. Like, it's not something I've used a ton over a long amount of time. It was sitting in a drawer. Like, what the heck?
Did you contact the company support at?
No, I did not consider that. I usually try to solve my own problems. Depends on what it is. But I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to order a new one or a better one. And then I'm like, who am I? I fix things. So I got out the JB Weld and I put that thing back together. And I don't know. I haven't been back to work yet. We'll see if it works now. But
how long did that take you?
What?
To fix?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay. They're not that long. Okay.
It's just two little plastic tabs that broke off, and I JB welded it. And
yeah.
I'm not sure I got the mix ratio right. It seemed like it was taking too long to cure, or maybe it's just old. But Fixing stuff, man.
I wanted to give a
That's why
shout
things
out.
should be repairable, Ben.
Well, okay. On that note, oh, I did say for the Maker Minute that Mikhail Kalashnikov would be our Maker Minute for.
Does that mean we need to talk about the AK?
Well, maybe because that was the counterpart to the M16, and maybe it's not as reliable a gun as it's made out to be, but only in comparison to the M16 during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
But I think it still has that reputation, right? As just
Yeah,
you could
I
beat
mean,
the crap out of that
right.
thing, and it's still going to work.
And the only thing I know is its reputation. I've never handled one or fired one, or certainly used one extensively. But the reputation is, yeah, it will just take anything you can throw at it. It just works all the time.
Wait, they didn't have you firing them when you were over at the ISIS training camp? No.
Wow. No, we were picking up all the armaments that were left behind
Knock, knock. Oh,
by
God.
the U.S. government.
Listen,
And we're using those now.
no comedy is off limits. So this vacuum cleaner, this Kenmore Progressive. This thing is an old
Good
school.
transition, Ben.
Yeah, well, everyone has to clean. I just want to give a shout out because we're talking about reliability, and this Kenmore Progressive. It's a bit of a honker. It is not a modern vacuum cleaner. I bought this thing in 2000 and 2001, I think. So I've had this thing for 20 years, which I think is a long time to have a vacuum cleaner.
That's a very long time.
The motor blew out maybe 10 years ago, and I found a vacuum repair shop. I brought it in, and it cost a little bit to get it repaired. The guy was like, you could just get another one. And I asked him, how long is this thing going to last if I get this motor replaced? And he's like, these things are it's going to last you another 10 years at least. And here I am. I think when this thing was purchased, it was maybe a few $100s, which at the time probably was a lot for a vacuum cleaner. Nice high-end vacuum cleaners now are up in the 4 digits,
Yeah.
like 1,000 easily. And I just had to order a new part, just a wheel. Took like 2 weeks to arrive. It was $5. That's it. That's all I've ever had to replace on this thing. 20 years to own a vacuum cleaner. So just a shout out to Kenmore Progressive, because I don't know if the vacuum cleaners that you buy today for $1,000, $2,000 last that long. But I'm impressed. I mean, a vacuum cleaner is maybe not the most high tech piece of equipment, but it does take a beating.
I mean, you can do anything badly. I'm mostly impressed that you can still buy parts for it. Like, do they still make that vacuum cleaner?
No, that impressed me too. Maybe they've carried over the parts. I don't know. It's pretty easy to find.
I mean, I feel like there's a conversation to be had there about like service life as well.
So, yeah, that's a calculation you have to make as a company. We're going to discontinue.
I mean, one of the problems with having something that lasts a long time is needing parts for it later.
Yeah.
Because more than likely, I'm partly bringing this up because I take some flack over it. They're like, oh, I can't believe you don't have this part. And I'm like, we haven't made that thing in years. Like, we don't just have a storeroom full of spare parts sitting around. And, again, like compared to big companies, some big companies do that, I guess. I don't know why they had parts for your vacuum cleaner. Or they don't. And that happens a lot. I'll often I've got some old thing and it's got a part I need. And the company's like, too bad, so sad. Okay, well, things become obsolete.
Yeah.
That just happens.
What product are you referring to when you said that someone has reached out and said, I can't believe you don't make parts for that anymore?
I think
pretty old that you don't make anymore.
Mostly 4.7 stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and even lights that were retired like before we acquired the brand. We never had parts for them, or in some cases there was a stockpile of parts
and it was
that I bought from David, but like we don't have the tooling or anything to make those. They don't go into any product, so we can't ramp up production for something we don't use.
Yeah.
I mean, I try as much as I can to avoid that. But sometimes it's unavoidable. I wanted to go back to, I always say this, but everything's reliable until it breaks. So reliability is really a statistical measure of the overall production. It is not a measure of one item. And I think that is confusing for people because usually your experiences with the one item.
And when you say item, you mean the part?
Whatever it is, the part, the assembly, the overall product. But like if you buy a product, one person will buy a product and it lasts forever and functions perfectly. Another person will buy that same product and something goes wrong with it on the first day.
Okay.
Those are two very different customer experiences. One that's going to leave a review that says, oh, this is the best thing ever. The other guy's going to give a 1-star review that's like, this broke the first day. That is not useful information. And I mean, partly this is why number of reviews is relevant. But as a manufacturer, if you have made 1 million of something and you have one fail, that's great. Right?
I would agree.
That's not great if you're the person that bought that one thing, but that also doesn't mean the product line itself is not reliable.
Got it.
And, you know, we were talking about like the drop testing and stuff earlier. Like, yes, you can test flashlights like that. At the same time, you can like set it on your desk and bump it off and it falls on the floor and it breaks for some reason. But failure is often an incredibly complex interaction of like dozens and dozens of variables. And just in this case, enough of them added up to like reach that failure threshold.
Yeah.
Whereas in other situations, it doesn't. So it's not just a reliable or not reliable. It's like incredibly complex. And I mean, I've had things that I've had break on me when I didn't think they should, but like sometimes just weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
I was going to relate that back to so like with the M16, one of the problems is like, was there a decrease in function? Like, could that be anticipated at all? Or I don't know. I'm just thinking about the whole it's reliable until it's not thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
that was not my best.
I mean, that's just a classic I'm no expert moment.
Yeah. We can put that one on our highlights.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a toss-up maker minute-wise between Kenmore, maker of my Kenmore Progressive, and Mikhail Kalashnikov, who we didn't really talk about much. We didn't get into the AK-47. Neither of us have fired that thing. I mean,
the M16 and the AK are like the two most popular weapons, of the century, right? Yeah. I mean, in terms of warfare, I don't sort of like that classic battle between, where they're two kind of prototypical titans, and they're incredibly different design philosophies. Which one is better? Hard to say. But if you bake problems into it, like that's hard to avoid.
Yeah, I would agree. This does make me want to head out to the gun range. Speaking of, I'm overdue to renew my membership at the gun club, and I got to get out there and sight my rifles for deer season, which is coming up.
Coming on to fall.
Speaking of dirty, I do have a black powder for whatever that is. Yeah, black powder season.
You have a black powder rifle?
Yeah, I got it from a friend of mine. A friend of mine gave me or sold me his dad's old one. So I bought that, and I have yet to kill a deer. I'm going on.
Have you shot it?
3. I did in season 1 on the very last day of powder season. I saw a buck, and I took a shot, and I missed, which is terrible. Not ever the outcome that a hunter wants to.
Well, there's a whole lot more work if you don't miss.
There's a whole lot more work if you don't miss. I blame the gun to my buddy
Hmm.
but probably it was
So
my
is
fault.
this like a Civil War relic, or like what's
No,
the
no,
story?
these are modern. They got modern. They're very modern. And they, they're very accurate, but they're also pretty dirty. You can shoot it. Like if you
You get
shoot it
that
more
nice
than
big
three
puff.
times, yeah, big cloud. If you shoot it more than three times, you could start to get into some trouble. So you do have to clean them pretty frequently, and they are pretty dirty.
I mean, this is like the patch powder. Does it shoot a
Not
ball?
not a patch. It's a little pellet. Little
Oh,
pellet is your primer, but you do put the powder down the barrel, and
okay.
it's a 50 caliber.
Yeah.
They're all
So it's a
50.
ball.
They're all 50 caliber.
Is it a ball
It's not a ball. It's a proper bullet.
shaped?
Yeah, yeah. It makes a loud noise, and it does a big cloud of smoke, which is a lot of fun because you can't see what you like. When I shot it, it was like 10 seconds before I could
Yeah.
see the ass of the deer running away, and I was very dismayed. But
Huh. Yeah. Right. Do you go to any reenactments,
Wait,
like Civil War reenactments?
I've never been. I've never been. No, those people mystify me.
They
What
do.
if like you?
It's like cosplay.
Yeah, I guess, but
It's like LARPing. LARPing.
someone has to be the person who gets shot first. So you're that person. So you're lying there for the whole battle, pretending you're dead. Is that fun? That's how you want to spend your Sunday as that guy? Like
You just
everyone
have to do
goes
the
there and they're like,
Matrix thing. And
I want to be the hero who's the last one, like the
that's a
Mel
good point.
Gibson.
How do you decide
How do
when
you decide?
nothing's actually happening?
Do you draw? Do you draw cards or something? I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Do you
But
know what LARPing is?
yeah, live action role playing.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for our listeners.
I do know what LARPing is. I have never LARPed.
No,
Uh,
I when I was in like fifth and sixth grade, maybe really wanted to get into it. Like we had some lady come to school, um, that she was teaching us how to make like, oh gosh, what's it called? The crest that like goes on your shield.
yeah,
There's like a term for that, not an emblem, but no,
Crest sounds
nothing.
right. No, Crest sounds right, but
I feel like something that ends with an N. Anyway, there are like all these rules about like how you can use colors and which ones can touch each other, and so we all made these like family crests kind of things, whatever they're called.
emblem?
Oh, it's really bothering me. Coat of arms?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know, something like that. Um, but I think she was also like into LARPing, so she was telling us about like they'd gone. I'm actually curious how old she was now. I mean, she was a grown up, so I'm not sure at that age. But yeah, like running around the park with like making armor and like swords and battle axes, and I was like, that is sweet.
Would they throw the fantasy part in? Because a lot of people who got into D&D, Dungeons
Mm-hmm.
and Dragons, and that kind of role playing would do LARPing, but you could have like wizards who would throw spells, which were like tennis balls, like fireball.
Mm-hmm.
Was it that kind of LARPing or just the medieval
I think it was
boffer
just
swords?
medieval.
Yeah.
There
Okay.
was like a club or something in town.
Yeah.
Um, I know. It still kind of sounds fun. I feel like I might be too much of a jaded grown up and would like be embarrassed.
I
Like I've
think
never done any like role playing really. Even in D&D, I don't usually like. Or I mean, when I used to do D&D, I didn't really like play a character.
you were just uh, Johnson, the maker. I'll be a tinker. That's what I'll be in my D&D fantasy world. No,
No,
I'm just gonna make like watches and stuff. Yeah,
I was
no, I'm
always a ranger.
just gonna hang out in my shop. I think
Yeah.
you're the ranger. Well, we have strayed. We've strayed. We are close to out of time. I say to the listener, let's just go Mikhail Kalashnikov as our maker minute, and I think I'll drop some links just to some of the stuff that we've been reading on the M16 verses.
Don't forget the vacuum cleaner.
Don't forget the vacuum cleaner. I mean, that's the honorary mention here. The Kenmore progressive listener. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope that all the products that you surround yourself with in your life, in your day to day, prove reliable over time. And Jason, the most reliable of us all, is you standing in front of me. I'm Ben. I'm no expert.
I'm Jason. I'm no expert. I try to be reliable. I do my best. But sometimes you screw up. Talk to you guys soon.
Bye-bye.